Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving into something absolutely chilling: how the terrifying supernatural encounters people report today are actually tied to buried, deeply tragic histories. We're going to break down the anatomy of what our sources call ruined spirits, basically tracing the screams of the past right into the present day. We'll be looking at the exact blueprint of these legends to figure out how they're built and, honestly, why they stick with us for so long.
Let's kick things off with a question. Just picture this. You're driving through a winding, dangerous landslide zone in the dead of night, and suddenly you spot a crying child. Do you stop your car? Or what if you're walking past this ancient Haveli looking for a shortcut, and a local villager stops you, warning you not to go near it because the walls themselves are weeping? Seriously, what do you do? These exact dilemmas are the perfect hooks for the urban legends we're unpacking today. They literally force us into the middle of the horror, testing our natural curiosity right against our basic survival instincts.
Okay, so let's start with Section 1, the modern encounters, and look at the symptoms.
Before we dig into the dark history behind these haunts, we really need to look at the adrenaline-pumping, modern-day confrontations that bring these stories to life. Take our first example. It brilliantly illustrates this wild clash of eras. We've got Aryan. He's a modern travel vlogger, totally armed with high-tech cameras, and he strolls into the infamous Kala Haveli right at 11 p.m. with this complete absolute bravado. But he's walking into an environment so ancient, so incredibly heavy, that he notes the cold air physically feels like it's pushing against his chest. It's the ultimate setup, right? Modern skepticism crashing headfirst into an immovable, unseen force. Now, the suspense here builds through some very specific, frankly terrifying symptoms. First off, the tech just fails. Aryan's expensive camera starts glitching out of nowhere. Then come the visual anomalies. On his screen, and only on his screen, a faint, red glow pops up on the upper balcony. And then the audio hits. Chun-chun, the unmistakable sound of a pile or ankle bell. Finally, he sees the manifestation of a woman in a torn red Bonaerese saree, humming a melody. It's supposed to be a lullaby, but it sounds exactly like a funeral dirge. Just notice how these sensory details stack up to create this deeply immersive nightmare scenario.
And then, the humming woman turns around. Aryan sees that her face is basically a charred mask of burnt skin with completely hollow eyes. She reaches out with a hand that's nothing but bone and whispers, "Mera bachcha kahan hai?" Where is my child? This chilling question is the absolute climax of Aryan's encounter. It's the breaking point. He literally drops his tripod and bolts for the doors, only to discover the most terrifying detail of all. The doors are locked from the outside.
The crucial takeaway here is that this formula isn't just a one-off. It repeats. It's not isolated to just one creepy old building. Take the legend of the silent passenger of Shimla, for instance. A solo driver stops for a crying child in a landslide zone, looks over and sees the passenger seat is completely empty. But then, completely unexplainably, small, muddy handprints start appearing on the fogged-up car windows. No way, right? Whether it's a vlogger in a Haveli or a driver in Shimla, the pattern is the same. An unsuspecting person gets thrust right into the physical manifestation of residual grief.
Which brings us to Section 2, uncovering history and the ruined past. To truly understand why these stories get under our skin, we have to look past the immediate jump scare of the ghost. We've got to analyze the hidden, buried past, because that's where the foundation of the horror is actually poured. According to our sources, we aren't dealing with random, chaotic hauntings here. A ruined spirit has a very specific definition. It's a soul locked into the walls of a tragic history, specifically due to human betrayal and covered-up secrets. They're tethered to a location, not just because they died there, but because of a dark, concealed history that the living world actively tried to sweep under the rug. And this timeline maps out those concealed facts perfectly. We start with the Kala Haveli fire in the 1920s. Jump forward a few decades, and we have the Shimla school bus accident in the 1970s. Both of these lead directly to the modern-day glitches and terrified encounters. What this really highlights is how human betrayals from decades ago don't just vanish. The covered-up tragedy festers, kind of like an infected wound, and eventually bubbles right back up into the terrifying modern encounters we just talked about. Moving right along to Section 3, Anatomy of Tragedies, let's look at the actual blueprint. So there's a very distinct blueprint to these stories. Following the exact structure from the source material, we can break this lore down into 3 distinct steps. Step 1 is the tragedy. This could be a dark ritual fire, maybe a fatal accident.
Step 2 is the betrayal, and honestly, this is the absolute linchpin. It's the locked doors or the official cover-ups by the authorities. Then, step 3 is the curse, where the spirit is eternally searching for what was lost. In the Haveli case, a wealthy patriarch literally locked his own family inside during a fire, just to hide their dark rituals from the British authorities. That specific human betrayal, that's the catalyst for the whole shebang.
And that brings us to the absolutely tragic reality of Ishani's fate. She was the youngest daughter-in-law, she was deeply loved, yet ultimately betrayed by her very own family. She woke up to thick smoke, couldn't escape, and died clutching an empty cradle. Now she's locked in the exact same walls that betrayed her. It's so crucial to understand that Ishani isn't malicious. She isn't actively hunting down Aryan or anyone else for sport. She's a victim. She's eternally trapped and just searching for the infant son she couldn't save.
We really need to highlight a core parallel here. The 1920s patriarch locking those Haveli doors to hide his sins perfectly mirrors the 1970s local authorities covering up the Shimla school bus crash. Think about it. The supernatural lore is catalyzed entirely by the architectural and systemic betrayals committed by living, breathing humans. The monsters in these stories weren't the spirits. The real monsters were the people who locked the doors and buried the truth.
And you know what's wild? This anatomical structure echoes globally. Our sources link these exact elements to other famous legends, proving this is a universal phenomenon. We see echoes in Dowhill, which is famous for its tragic spirits with hollow eyes. We see immediate parallels to the real-life Barari case, with its locked doors and mysterious Havan rituals. The pattern even crosses continents. Look at the legend of El Silbón in Venezuela, a spirit doomed to literally carry the heavy wounds of past sins. Hidden rituals and locked doors are just universal triggers for this kind of profound lore everywhere.
Finally, let's wrap things up with Section 4, the lingering spirits in the psychological aftermath.
So, what do these legends actually leave behind for people like Aryan? Well, he managed to escape out a window with only a few scratches, but he says that whenever it rains, he can still hear that funeral dirge lullaby echoing in his sleep. We're left with a final, pretty chilling question to ponder today. When you look at the ruins of the Haveli now, is it really just a pile of bricks, or is it a literal cage for a mother's eternal grief? Did Ishani's family simply fall victim to a curse, or did their betrayal create their own monster? It really forces us to question if the true horror stems from the supernatural or the very human betrayals that birthed them in the first place. The main takeaway here, every ruin has a soul, and some are just waiting to be heard. Thanks for taking this deep dive with me in today's Explainer. Keep questioning the history behind the walls, and I'll catch you in the next one.